Corporate communication is the product of merging marketing with public relations. If you want to find out more about it, if you want to find out the history of corporate communication and how we actually got to ever talk about public relations in a company, watch this video. Welcome to another video. In this one we talk about the corporate communications history and how it developed starting in early 1900s. And you need to know that it took over 100 years of progress for corporate communication to progress as a field of business, and more than that, as a department in every company and organization nowadays. We will also discuss about the triggers that triggered the entire merging of marketing and public relations, so the corporate communication would be formed. Nowadays, corporate communications is one of the most used tools by managers and communication practitioners for the benefit of the company. Many companies have now consolidated all their communication activities in a single department that has access even to decision-making power. However, this was not always the case, and most of the times for the last 150 years, the only communication that the company were doing was communicating and informing about the products and the promotions they have, so they never actually thought about considering the image of the company and talking about it as about a person to create what we call now a brand personality or a brand. As discussed, all the communication disciplines started over 150 years ago, and for that let's look a glimpse into the history and see what was happening about 100 years ago. In early 1900s, there were different types of communications, and most of them consisted of selling activities, publicity and promotions to markets. We define communication management as any type of communication activity undertaken by an organization to inform, persuade or relate to individuals and groups in each outside environment. Probably you already know that in the early 19th century there was the Industrial Revolution that took place, and this is one of the most important factors that triggered the development of the corporate communication, because it helped a lot of companies and a lot of industries to grow in the UK, in the US, and all over the Western world. One thing that you need to understand is that back in those days, the normal companies, the usual companies that we would have today, only cared about publicity, promotions, and sales. In the same time, the industrial firms were looking to something different, completely different. They were looking to the government support, they were looking to customers, and they were also looking to the general public. So there was such a difference where the small companies were fighting to survive, while the industries and the big industrial firms were looking to the support of government. It's also what is happening today, but that is when it actually started, after the Industrial Revolution in the early 1900s. So this is actually what triggered the development of public relations. Right? Because in order to obtain the money and the support of government, you need somebody to communicate in the name of the company. They were also looking at customers, they were also looking at the general publics. So in the early 1900s, these companies started hiring external people. So there were no communication practitioners back then. Communication was no field, no discipline you would ever study. So companies were actually hiring outdoor and outside people that most of the times were propagandists, promoters, press agents, and basically anybody that could write. The problem was that these people had no business experience. They were writers, they were publicists or propagandists, so they didn't know anything about business. And because of this, these people could write and they could do it convincingly, but because of their practices, let's say that the companies started deceiving the customers. And by deceiving, I mean that at some point they were straight up lying about their products only to do and increase sales. And you may be wondering, okay, these companies were lying about their products to get more sales, but was nobody saying anything about it? Well, the answer is no. Because back in those days there was nobody that would fight against these these big giants, and if they ever did, these industrial firms had so much money that they could hire anytime external communicators that would basically doing the campaigns for them. Well, having the support of the government, you can imagine that these companies were basically immune from any kind of pressure from the government itself or from the public opinion. What changed it all was the fact that in early 20th century there was a group of investigative journalists that started exposing some of these scandals that were associated with capitalism, with the power, and of course it generated the government corruption. That was actually the problem that triggered the journalists to look into it, the fact that the government was corrupt. And this is one important thing. It was not the harmful practices of the companies that triggered the population or the general publics to look into their practices. It was the corruption of the government. And I cannot name any companies right now that were doing harmful practices back then because of obvious reasons, but you've got Google and you can Google them, and trust me, you would be surprised. Having these kind of campaigns against them, companies started realizing that, well, it's important now for us as a company to maintain our image. They were not even conceiving the concept of corporate image, of company brand. They were only thinking that, okay, we have these journalists that talk about us and they provoke some scandals about our practices, which, yeah, they are not okay, but we cannot correct them right now, so we will start hiring people to answer to the questions of these journalists. And in 1920, this is the point when the companies started hiring in-house communication practitioners. So basically, if there is ever a point in history where public relations started, it is in 1920 when companies hired people inside of their companies, not just for special contracts like before, to do the communication campaigns for their company. As a summary of everything we talked about so far is the fact that in the beginning, after the Industrial Revolution, there was a lot of space and benefits that the industrial firms took advantage of to literally grow explodingly. So they grow so big that they overlapped all the other companies, and because they wanted to sell even more, at some point the companies started lying about their products and about the benefits of their products, because the people who were doing the communication campaigns for these companies were propagandists. There were no specialized writers that could do any communication campaigns. It was propagandists, it was ex-journalists and people like this. And because of in the 1920, in the early 20th century, a group of investigative journalists saw the corruption of the government, they also started looking into the harmful practices of the companies. So in 1920, the company started hiring journalists and propagandists, obviously the same people, but they started hiring them in the company for full-time communication, because basically what the companies ever wanted was, we want to keep doing our job and our things the way we do, even if it is harmful, but we need to have some people that say to the public, no, what you're saying is not true, we don't do that. That's all they wanted, to have a clean image, not necessarily to be a good company or a good citizen in the society. They wanted to sell and do promotions to sell even more. It took 10 years for communication practitioners, well, these ex-propagandists and journalists and people who could write, to form some strategies about writing and in writing of a company. So in 1930 we could actually talk about having a marketing department and a communication department in the same company. It is very important. Nowadays we take it as usual. We know that communications should be going on about a company, and in the company we talk about external communication, we talk about internal communication. But back then, 100 years ago, this was not even a subject to think about. So it took over 50 years for organizations to start to really bring these disciplines together. And when they did, they called it corporate communication. So marketing and public relations, but together. It took 50 years. And there was quite a logical reason behind merging marketing and public relations. Because remember what I told you, right? For the entire period of time since the companies were created, marketing was created as well. It was not necessarily named marketing. They knew it as promotions, they knew it as sales, they knew it as publicity, but in essence it was marketing. The new aspect was corporate communications or public relations, that basically these practitioners of communications were saying, hey marketeers, We know what you do. We know that you lie about the products, about the practices, only to generate more sales. And our job is to have a clean image of the company. So basically, let us take control over you so that we will supervise that you won't lie so bad that you won't create any problems for us. That was the main idea. And this is why it took over 50 years and even more than that to actually have an alignment in the company of which department should dominate the other one. And the first model that we ever had was in 1978 when Philip Kotler came out with the first model that explained the different possible ways for marketing and public relations to be managed within a company. Ideally, they proposed to have them together in the same department, managed by a vice president of marketing and public relations. So by looking at this model, we can see that there are different models for companies to manage the public relationships and marketing, and I've discussed all these particular models in another video individually. We talk about the history here, but if you want to see all these models and how they work individually, you can check it out here, or there is also a link into the description. You can watch it there and you would come back at this video. Going on, we are in 1980 now, and marketing and public relations are still seen as different disciplines with different objectives. Marketing deals with the markets, while public relations deals with all the publics, excluding the customers and the consumers. Therefore, the markets were segments of population for which a product or a service is or could be in demand. Publics are seen as actively creating and mobilizing themselves whenever companies make decisions that affect a group of people adversely. In conclusion, here is that marketing exists to sense, serve and satisfy customers' needs at a profit, while public relations exist to product goodwill with the company various publics so that these publics do not interfere in the company's profit-making ability. So after 1980, the companies actually started making greater use of public relations and marketing, and what they were doing is that sometimes they were actually using the public relations, so the communication department of the company, to publish news and about the launch of products and promotions of their services. So although it started good about communication being used for communicating about the company to protect the image of the company, the marketeers actually said, hey, communication practitioners, you need to communicate, right? Yeah, well, communicate about our products. So basically, the communication practitioners started doing the job of the marketeers. But that's a whole nother story. They went on, and this was called the MPR. So that is called Marketing Public Relations. And we also have a separate video about them. Well, I discussed the differences between the market public relations and the corporate public relations. You can watch it right here. You can watch in the links in the description. It is quite interesting to see the battle between these two departments. Even nowadays, in 2020 something, whatever year you are watching this video in, the communication and the public relations and marketing are still seen as different disciplines, and you need to know that we will go over this because this is a battle that will never end, because companies want to make profit in the same time they understand or don't necessarily understand the importance of having a good brand. So we will go on and look at the historical aspects, and we will actually look at the 3 triggers that triggered the drivers to push between merging the two disciplines into an integrated one. So these were the market and environmental based drivers, communication based drivers, and organizational drivers. Feel free to pause the video and have a closer look to each one of them. I'll explain each one of them differently and quite simply. So the market and environmental based drivers, you need to think about the needs and the demands of different stakeholders. For example, you need to think about the customers, about the employees, the investors, activist groups, and all the stakeholders that demand transparency. The next factor is the same thing goes for the internal communication to employees and external communications. You cannot have different messages going on about your company. You want to transmit one coherent and transparent message to everybody. So companies want to be seen as coherent and trustworthy with nothing to hide, so that the messages they transmit to the market should be the same. Going on, we have the third driver, and that is the communication-based drivers that are really reaching the target audiences with the same messages of the company. So the studies show that a person like you and me gets hit with more than 13,000 companies' messages a day. Imagine there are 13,000 companies a day that send messages to you, and the company wants to be the one that gets your attention, obviously. So a company needs to integrate marketing and public relations. That's what they got to understand. Okay, we send the same message, but we need to work together because the competition is so high that we actually need to work together because there is no other way to transmit the same message and to be transparent, to have the same promotions or news or public releases that are about us to the same public. And finally, the organizational drivers are about the organization as a whole becoming more efficient. So this means obviously cost efficient. Remember, when we talk about the companies, it's always about money. So if I say efficient, is cost efficient. You know that all the companies want to make as much profit as possible, so think about it. If you have a department for public relations and if you have another department for marketing, you need to have a lot of employees and you need to pay them salaries. So it is cost efficient to merge them together and only to keep the essential workers there, right? These are the final factors. So businesses realized that they can merge the departments, the public relations and the marketing departments, into what is called the corporate communication. So this is why how they merged, and have one department with multiple expertise to reduce costs as well. So right now we got to the present tense. It is 2020 something, and we have marketing and communication, public relations in the same department. We call it corporate communications. And maybe your question is that, do they have a good strategic department of corporate communication? The answer is no. The companies nowadays still do not accept, not all the companies, right? Not all the companies accept the idea of corporate communications, not even today, after 150 years of history. And well, most of the companies still have separate departments. They still have separate departments for marketing and public relations. They call it public relations communications, or they call it public relations marketing, or whatever. And the idea is that something gets mixed with sales, and that's no similar thing, but whatever. The good thing is that they have the same department. Although they might not be in one unit, in one department, they were not called corporate communication. One good thing that is actually existent now in most of the companies is that marketing and public relations also have the same leaders. So when we go at a decision-making process, it is one person that knows both sides of the story, which is obviously very important. So I leave you with a model that shows it exactly how it works nowadays. The public relations disciplines are displaced toward the left, whereas the marketing communication disciplines are aligned toward the right. These disciplines might be used separately on their own for public relations or marketing purposes, but organizations manage them together, having in mind the company's overall reputation. If you got it so far in this video, I will also give you a gift. It is the model of Siemens. You know the company Siemens. This is the model and how they work. And I will not explain them because this is not the purpose of the video. It is only about the history of it, but this is a gift from me to see how it works in the present. This was everything for this video. I hope you understand now the history of corporate communication. I hope you understand how marketing used to work, how public relations used to work, how public relations actually got born, and how it merged with marketing in time. It took about 100 years to merge these departments together and have what we call now corporate communication. I hope you understood the role, the very important role of the Industrial Revolution in the entire scheme. And also, please check out the other videos on my channel, because I have videos about communications, I have video about marketing, and I obviously have videos about the corporate communication. Check them out. They are separate playlists, separate videos, all the information you would like to know. And one more thing, if you are an entrepreneur at the beginning of the road, you just created your very first company, you might be thinking about creating a marketing plan or a marketing strategy or a communication strategy or even an entire business plan? Well, if this is the case, I've already helped you. In the description down below you will find a link with a manual with all the information you need and a notepad and a notebook that you can fill in after reading the information in the manual. And by the end you will have created your very first original marketing and communication strategy for your company and the entire business plan overall. So check that link out. And one more aspect, if you would like to support my channel, because it takes a lot of time and I run on a lot of coffee for the research of the video, for filming the videos and for editing the videos for you guys to watch it for free, well, you can buy me a coffee. There is a link down in the description where you can do that. I'll appreciate it very much. Leave a comment in the description for the YouTube algorithm, you know how it is nowadays. And I will see you at the next video. Bye.